to our phenomenal viewers, listeners, and supporters. I am your host, Podcast Bree, and I am so excited to be here. If you're a new audience member, we are so grateful to have you. Welcome to another episode of Connected, where we discuss all things mental health, recovery, employment, and stories. Before we dive in, this episode is sponsored by Contra Costa Behavioral Services and John Muir. On our next 3 episodes, Connected will be focused on the BIPOC community, sharing personal anecdotes, facts, and awareness from specialists around the Bay Area. Today's very, very special guest is an artist with a heart of gold, cancer warrior, matriarch, mental health advocate, and co-founder of beingwell.org. Gail Miller embodies her lived experience. Gail and the family dynamic was significantly impacted after one of her daughters was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Gail then made it her mission to not only educate herself, but thousands of others alongside her partner. While struggling with depression herself, Gail uses her extraordinary artwork as an outlet for self-expression. It is truly an honor to welcome my Aunt Gail.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so excited for this episode.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
No worries. It's been a couple of years in the making, but I feel like timing is everything. And to be able to do this and then just kind of get to know you more outside of how I initially knew you, it'll be a great episode.
Thank you.
So I've known this lady since I was like 4 or 5 years old. So this is like truly my Aunt Gail. This is my best friend's mother, and my intro to mental health for the most part. We were just kind of raised a little differently, and so I wasn't always empathetic to this side of the family's the things that they were going through. And so now that I have lived experience, I work around it, I understand it more for sure, and then we're just kind of like rebuilding our relationship from there. But I am happy that you're here and to share your story and like where you come from.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, actually.
Yay. She looks great, you guys. I'm so excited. So we talked a little bit earlier, and you gave me some background of like your parents and how it's always interesting that the traumas of our parents and our grandparents always kind of trickle down to us, and we're trying to fix things and unlearn certain behaviors. And so like given your childhood experiences, like what were your parents' view on mental health? Was that something that was talked about, discussed at all, or how was that?
No, I was born in an era where they were really the first generation after slavery, kind of, or second generation. And so there was this mentality, especially among Black folks, that you don't have time to be depressed. You got stuff to do. So your tears needed to be wiped quickly. And my father certainly, who was working, and now I have a better appreciation for what he was doing when we were younger, but because he was out there doing a job that most Black men weren't able to get, even in high school. He was the first Black manager back then it was called Pacific Bell or Ma Bell. That was the telephone company that now morphed into AT&T and split off. He was their first Black manager. He was in advertising. So he would have to go around to various clients and sell Yellow Pages, which I don't know if your generation even knows what Yellow Pages are, the fact that people had to go out and sell advertising. Book. I used to get to help him cut out ads, and we would create these ads for people using that rubber glue, and I would rub that rubber glue and make balls. That was probably our only bonding experience. My dad intimidated the heck out of me. I was very, 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 very shy. That was not addressed at all, but what my mother did keep me in was drawing supplies. She knew that would help draw me out, but she had her own depression and coming from her own really jacked up childhood and losing her parents at the age of 5.
Oh, wow.
And being raised by a very abusive family member. There were 8 children in her family, and they were all split up after the death of their parents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so she brought all that with her. They were orphans. And so orphans, and I've had a chance to talk to all my cousins now, our first cousins, and we've talked about what it was like being raised by these orphans. They learned to cling together they all came together as young adults and created this. I mean, they already had a bond, but it was amazing and fierce. There's only one left now. And I'm trying to make it so my kids can go back to Texas, which is where my family's from, to make sure that we bond over that. So no, to get back to your question, no, I didn't have time. I mean, I cried a lot, so I thought I was the weakest link in my family. I found out later on I wasn't. I was able to get out what was bothering me, and so it didn't fester in me. And I watched my sister and brother suffer as a result of not shedding the tears that I shed. So
yeah, and that's good that you said that, because your biggest power is ultimately like letting things go. It doesn't do any good when it's just sitting in there. You have all this animosity and anger. It hurts you. People could be moving on along their day and not even knowing that you're sitting there hurting, and you just let it go, and then you feel so much better. But then when you kind of hold on to that, it manifests throughout your childhood and throughout your adulthood and within your relationships. And so that's good that you at least had some kind of outlet and you did something. You are kind of like the matriarch of your family, you would say. Would you consider yourself the strong one? Because I see oftentimes, just from an outsider looking in, it seems like you're the most responsible when it comes to like maybe the person that everybody goes to when things are going wrong. So do you feel, as a Black woman, do you feel that pressure of being the strong one?
Yes, absolutely. And masking. Masking how I truly feel. But it comes out anyway. I've always talked about not dealing with stuff or pretending like things are not affecting me because I have to be strong for other people or go around helping people. But in the end, even that hurt me by not admitting that I couldn't do everything. I didn't want my kids, my girls especially, because I have 3 girls, I didn't want them to see me as weak ever. So I kept my tears inside often until I lost my mother. And I also felt this great sense of relief. It sounds weird, but for the first time, people viewed me as this strong, outspoken person, but inside I was not her. I was this little hurt little girl. But I've always, and one thing that I've remained consistent about is fighting for the underdog. Even as a shy little girl, I would fight for the underdog, even if I got my butt kicked.
Right.
So yeah, felt like I had to be strong. And I felt like I was put in the position of my family, even though I'm not the oldest, to be the most responsible. And that became what was expected. And my parents held me to that and made me responsible for my sister and brother, even though I didn't want to be.
Right.
And I felt this responsibility like I had no choice.
Yeah. I feel like I didn't grow up until after my mom passed away, because everything was kind of not thrown on me, but my brother and I were 5 years apart, and then I was living with my mother. So to have to go through all of her things, and then you helped me with the obituary, and then just like all these different factors that go into, oh snap, like I have to figure it out myself. I honestly didn't feel like I was an adult until, that significant life experience. And then I remember being there when your mom passed away, and you had set a boundary. And I remember one of your daughters was having a moment, and she was just crying hysterically. And you were like, Sydney, I'm writing my mom's obituary right now. Like, can we put this on pause for a hot second? Like, I got a lot going on, and just establishing that boundary and standing up for Gail and what Gail had to do was probably hard in one instance, because you're seeing a loved one struggle, but then you're also like, look, I got to put my big girl panties on. This is what I got to do right now. So that was, I don't know, that always, it stayed with me.
And I don't even remember the incident.
I bet.
I don't. I was in a fugue state. I mean, we expected her to die. We had been watching. I would never, watching your loved one when they're on hospice and you are part of the team that takes care of them day in, day out.
Yeah.
I wish now, hindsight, I wish we had probably kept her in the facility she was in and just visited or stayed with her because I recognized after the fact that how tough it was on my children to watch their grandmother and go through all the stages of death. But I didn't really, I just went into action mode after she died. And I didn't grieve until months later. And there was a comedy, I was watching, there's a show that comes on called Unsung. And I was watching the Unsung about Bernie Mac, who up until that time hadn't been one of my favorite comedians. He's really, really good, but he was my mother's favorite. And it was after watching his Unsung that I understood why. And I lost it. I cried and cried, and Sydney came in, who's my middle child, and said, "Mom, are you okay?" And for the first time, I said, "No, I'm not okay." And I never wanted them to see that, you know, but I was like, no. So she went and got her big sister. She got Taylor. And Taylor came in and said, "Mom, are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm not okay."
Right.
And I was still crying. And I cried. I cried for days. And they called my husband at work, and he came home because they're just like, "Mom's crying." Something they never saw. And so that incident actually led to, I think 3 times that month. The beach is my happy place. We ended up driving to Half Moon Bay and to Bodega Bay just to get me out of my environment into a happier place. But that was the beginning of me actually repairing my relationship, unfortunately, after the fact, with my mom, though, in my head. Reconciling my childhood, forgiving her for not being the parent I thought she should be.
Right.
And accepting that she did the best she could with the limited resources that she had.
Yeah. And I can also relate to that as well, because after my mom passed away, I had to have a conversation with about, which is my stepfather, about how I was raised and the things that that he kind of put me through a little bit. And so we had a really honest conversation. And then now, taking care of his parents, I realized the kind of background that he came from. And my grandma having dementia, you know, like she says certain things and it's just like, oh, you know, like adults, old people just be
they
saying
blurt stuff out.
Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, but you know, noted, right? And so he was doing the best that he could with his situation, and my parents being in the Army and going through, you know, just the military and how stressful that was. And then living in California, buying a house at 24, 25, having 2 kids. So it's a lot, and that you just kind of have to give your parents grace. I had to, because I needed peace and I needed to move on. And so it's always interesting when you can have those kind of conversations. And at least in his case, he took accountability. You might not have had that in your situation, but you were still able to have your peace.
No, my mom, one thing she did that will stay with me for the rest of my life is when my daughter, the one that had the diagnosis you mentioned, we were able to send her to an equine therapy boarding school for 2.5 years. And because my mom was living with us at the time, she had to go. We used to have to go to family therapy. We had to, as parents, we had to go once a month, but family therapy, I think, was once a quarter. And we would take the kids and do this long journey from here to Utah. And I made her come. And it was only after spending the weekend there and understanding, because to be honest, my mom used to say that we were punk-ass parents. If I could say
and
that.
I can hear Granny saying that.
Yeah, so if I can say that, because she said we were just, I overindulged my children, and she said I was raising them like white children, whatever that meant. But she went there, and there's workshops that you go through. There are chances for you to ask questions. You meet with counselors. She came away, and for the first time in my life, she said, "I'm sorry. I didn't understand. I thought that she was spoiled. I didn't understand that bipolar was actually a real thing. I thought she thought it was something I made up. So rather than,
you're creative.
Right, I'm that creative. So something that, rather than doing the research like I encouraged her to do, or even come to us with some of our, we probably have gone through hundreds of hours of therapy as a family and individually, just to kind of get a grasp on this. And what that did was actually make me and my girls closer. But that one weekend, I came back. My girls were able to share with me that I acted differently around my mother than I did with them. So you want to talk about putting your big girl panties up. I had to tell my mom to back off for the first time in my life. And my mother has a very strong personality, but I realized that my kids had to be able to trust me. And they're my kids. And I needed them to be able to trust that I could guide them, and I wouldn't let my mom, her influence impact how I treated them and what I said to them, and to get her to back off. But yeah, she didn't, but she's part of that whole generation of people, of Black women, of Black men, who buy into hard work. You are a child, so you will
stay in a child's place.
Stay in a child's place. Listen and not be heard. You could stay there as part of a conversation. When you open your mouth, it's time for you to get out.
Right.
And not believing that mental health is a real thing. And when I'd speak to and have spoken to many Black churches now, and large organizations like the Links organization invited me to their national convention. And one of the things I say is as Black people, we are praying people. Churches everywhere. I believe in prayer because I believe you have to have faith in order to have hope. In order to have recovery, you got to have faith, right?
And gratitude.
Absolutely. And it may not be, it's whatever your higher power is to you. But there's something else out there that's greater than all of us. So, but what I tell people is that faith, pills, and therapy can coexist, and they should coexist. It's real. One doesn't negate the other. If you're going to therapy, doesn't mean you can't talk to your pastor, and vice versa. But incorporate all of that into healing, and understanding that it's real. It's not something that we whisper anymore. It's not something that we do when we leave Uncle Joe out of it, because Uncle Joe wears the white suit and the moccasins and is talking to himself down the street, and we say, oh, that's crazy, Uncle Joe. Well, Uncle Joe, because this is a real life uncle to me, but his name wasn't Joe. He did all those things I just mentioned, but he was also a Vietnam vet.
Yep.
And horrible things happened in Vietnam, and he came back never the same. And that was never, ever addressed. Ever addressed. But we all knew. And I'll tell you what, though, he's the only one of the uncles and aunts that knew every single one of us kids, knew exactly when our birthdays was. I hadn't seen the man at one point in 15 years. And he said, hey, Gail, knew who I was, knew my children's names. I don't know how he knew, but he was the one that he invested in all that. And we wrote him off because he was the crazy one.
So thank you for sharing that with me. You talked about therapy. Was there like a significant thing that happened that was just like, okay, I need to get my butt in therapy?
Yeah. But I've been going to therapy for a long time, even before it was fashionable. I was in high school when I started. And it was because I used to have these terrible back spasms.
Okay.
They would become debilitating, that all I could do, my back would go into cramps. All I could do was lay down. And my doctor said, he's the one that suggested I go to therapy, and said, I can tell you half your problem is your mother, because I tried to fight her battles for her.
Oh, wow.
And he said, if you could just let her grow up and fight her own battles, that will help you immensely. And then I didn't understand. And then in college, the biggest catalyst for me was I was raped in college by a trusted friend, and shamed, seriously shamed. And so much so that I left California shortly after. I left school, left California. I went to therapy for a little bit, but it wasn't until some years later that I really said, you got to deal with this, because I wanted it to be, I'm a big proponent in confronting your issues and not running away, because I have siblings that didn't confront their issues and took another route through substance abuse. And I didn't want to do that. I ended up doing kind of that anyway with alcohol, but I wanted to find out what it was about me that made me vulnerable enough for that to happen, so it would never happen again. And after I started having children, it made me hypersensitive and hyper aware. So I didn't let them do anything. They couldn't go to the park by themselves. They couldn't barely play outside without me coming out. I was scared to death for them. And then I had to realize I don't want that life for them because that's my stuff. But yeah, that was the big thing, was me trying to unpack me and what happened to me. I wanted to understand myself better. Yeah.
I was having a conversation with another guest that we're going to have on the show, and she was saying something similar happened to her. And so she was so much harder on her girls than she were her boys, and or at least the older two for sure. And she was just like, it just made me project my traumas onto them. And it's something that she would often do. And she was like, I had to have a conversation with them and just be like, you know, I'm sorry. Like, I got to unpack me and get me together. And it's a big thing. And it gives your children healing and to be able to let go, to see that their parents can take accountability for certain things. And there's always reason or rhyme behind a lot of things that we do, especially I feel like a lot of things are going to come up as me about to become a parent, and a parent without a parent. It's like
your child has the ability to bring you to your knees, like nothing you've ever seen. You've not experienced heartbreak until one of your children's hearts are broken. Fear and pain, they ache, you ache. And in learning more about myself, I'm trying to be transparent to my girls. One of them is now a mom of a 4-year-old, so we have a little one that runs around and tells us what to do.
Right.
And she does. But what it did is, so I'm learning to be really honest with them about who I am just as a woman, because I was a woman before I was their mother. And I was a little girl before that. And learning to show them my vulnerable side and not apologizing for it anymore. Because I think I spent half my childhood just trying to not live in regret and understand that the things that I've been through were not, some were good, some were great, some were terrible, but they were all lessons. And so instead of regrets, just saying, hey, what lesson did I learn from that? Yeah. And I move towards that every day. I'm not completely there yet, but that's what I'm trying to understand about me.
Yeah, I really try to take my L's, but turn them into lessons. It's like things happen to you for a reason, and embrace your flaws and embrace the not best decisions that you made, because it ultimately leads you to where you are right now in this moment.
And it's harder said than done. It sounds we're simplifying it, but it's been a years-long process. I am 62 years old right now.
You look amazing. I'm just going to keep adding. She looks phenomenal.
Well, I'm the only one of my friends that let their gray grow out. So
embrace it. It looks good.
I decided COVID was the catalyst. You can't keep going to get your hair dyed if the hairdresser's not there. So my kids encouraged me. They encouraged me to do two things, go natural and go gray. And my son-in-law was a huge catalyst in that. He was like, Mom, just let it go.
Right.
Yeah, he was like, let it go.
Right. Yeah, right on. So I talked about earlier in the intro, I said that you are a cancer warrior. And I say this because it'll present itself, it'll go away, it'll come back. And so given that you go through that often, what does it do to your psyche, kind of knowing that you're on borrowed time?
It's a lot. Well, I was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer in 2013. It's called adenoid cystic carcinoma. It's a salivary gland cancer. It's a head and neck cancer primarily, but it can pop up elsewhere in your body. And I'd never heard of it. Ironically enough, I got the call to definitively say, yes, you have cancer, and this is what kind it is, as my husband and I were on the freeway going to pick our daughter up from an inpatient unit. And I had to stop the tears and walk in and be ready to welcome her back home. And inside, I was falling apart. So for the last 10 years, I've never made it to remission. And there can be remission with this cancer, but there's no cure for it right now. They're working on it. I'm actually now in a trial study. And you asked what it does to my psyche. Well, it tears me up. I just recently came back from a 2-week trip in Europe. My friends were determined that I was going to get out of the house because I don't leave the house very often because I get sick. Every time I hear somebody cough, I don't think COVID. I think, is that going to land me in the hospital? So in 10 years, I've had 11 surgeries. I've had 36 rounds of radiation to my face. At one point, it looked like I had a raccoon mask on. I've had 6 rounds of radiation to my lungs. And most recently, a couple months ago, I had radiation to my spleen. It's now in my spleen.
Oh, wow.
So it takes a big chunk out of me every time. Unfortunately, I don't see myself spiraling until I begin to come out of it. But now what I'm doing differently than I did 10 years ago, and my kids made me promise to do this, is I used to keep stuff from them. But what it would do to them is scare the hell out of them because I would keep things quiet, and then the next thing I knew, I was having another surgery. And that would hit them like a ton of bricks. So they said, you've got to stop doing that to us. We're at an age where you can share what's going on with you. So we talk through stuff. I let them know what's going on. We make decisions. And it's been hard, but I fight. I don't have a choice. I want to see that little grandbaby of mine grow up, and I want to see my kids thrive. So at one point, I did think that I was going to die. There's, the chance to making it to 5 years with the cancer I have is, like 40-60, right? And because mine was super aggressive at the time, and it originated in my nose of all places, and had metastasized to my lungs by the time they found it. So I'd have surgery after surgery. And the initial was like, I felt like all I was doing was having surgery and recovering and having surgery and recovering. And you take a hit, and your life does. You start replaying mistakes. And that's where me saying, okay, so it's okay to make mistakes. Let's look at it as lessons. I can't have regrets for when I should have turned left and couldn't, and turn right. And in the middle of all this, I've got one child with this severe diagnosis. She was diagnosed with bipolar at 12, but fast forward to when she turned 19, she took herself off the medicine. I asked her doctors to take her off medicines because we didn't know who she was. I said, who is she? She's been on medication so long, I don't really know who she is. And they refused. She did it herself. But that created this diagnosis that my oldest daughter and I kind of had figured out already, but it took the doctors that long to catch up. She's really has borderline personality with anxiety and depression. So while there's pills for anxiety and depression, to have borderline personality, you really have to learn to manage yourself. And fortunately, we were able to give her the tools to be able to do that. And she does a good job for the most part. It's really hard to manage one's life when you have a diagnosis like that. I have another daughter that has a severe learning disability. So in the middle of all these cancer things going on, and my oldest one has anxiety. So everybody's got something. And I'm trying to manage them and their expectations and me. And so it's easy for me to get lost. I get lost, and I'm trying to, and so I guess I at this point, at the stage I'm in, I'm fighting for just me to get back to me. And so, yes, it messes me up to have this diagnosis. I think about it, and recently I just lost a dear cousin and a dear aunt to cancer. And last night I actually found out that another dear cousin has just been put in hospice. Cancer is ridiculous.
Do you think it festers from the traumas that we go through and things that we don't
I think part of it is. I think part of it, especially if you're a caretaker, I think caretakers, stress does kill you.
It does.
Um,
Physically.
and I think that adds to it. It's got to be environmental because so many people are popping up. In our family, I think there's some genetics to it. So myself and two other first cousins all have this, each one of us have this very rare form of cancer. They're all different, but every one of them is rare. And with my children and their health issues, we've worked with a geneticist, and we're going to continue to, because they think there's something genetic, but they can't quite put their finger on it.
Yeah.
Yet. So yeah, I think stress has played a huge part in the manifestation of what's happened to me. I had a heart attack at 37. That definitely was a bad husband.
Yeah.
My first, and I had an aneurysm at 40, and now I have cancer. It's a lot.
Yeah. It is. It's a lot. This is a heavy episode, and I'm glad we're getting through it without crying. I thought I was just being on a crying spell last night when I was thinking about it, but I think I'm doing good so far.
You are. You're doing good, and I talk about it as a matter of fact, and I don't mean to it's hard to talk about yourself and what you go through. And I think I've shared my story a lot, and I share it because I never want anybody's sympathy. And I don't even let my girls, I dare them to ever use what I go through as an excuse for not getting things done.
Right.
My oldest daughter is about to get her master's, and I couldn't be through everything. And she's had some serious health issues herself. She had two strokes at 26.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, you're aware of that. And she's married and has a child. And as you know, her husband went through a devastating accident. It was, and she's about to get her master's, and she's an archaeologist, which is also something very few Black folks go into.
Right.
So, you got to keep pushing. And I believe that I'm here for a reason. I think God left me here. Like I said, I've always been a fighter, and I've always fought for the underdog. And for me, if I can help another mom not go through what I went through, especially in those early stages of finding out my daughter was mentally ill, I'll do it. If I can just help one, I think, yeah.
My last question. So, given a higher power has granted you multiple chances at life, what is next for Gail and Being Well?
So it's Being Well CA, California. So Being Well, California. So beingwellca.org. Right now, I'm really excited. So for 5 years, first of all, back up. My partner and I came up with an idea for a license plate for California, a vanity plate, if you will. This one, though, 100% of the proceeds will go to help fund wellness programs in schools throughout California. When we first came up with this, we thought it was going to be slam dunk, so simple, was taking us a circuitous route through politicians and trying to get and legislation, and that got slammed. But we found a way to work through all that. We had a competition we held among high school students in the state of California to design this plate. It's a beautiful design. I have a little pin on that. Actually, I'm going to give you this pin. I should have brought the copy, but if you go to our website at beingwellca.org, go to our website, you will see a place to not only look at the winning design, but also to sign up and say, yes, I want this to be done. DMV it's now going into DMV for review. And it's been taking us 5 years to get here. We are super excited about it. Once it goes to DMV, it has to go to CHP. They have to and make sure that it can be read through all the license plate readers and blah, blah, blah. But once that plate is a thing, then what we have to do, we're tasked to sell 7,500 plates before the DMV will make it a continuous thing. And after that first run, this is legacy. This is something that the people in California can do to generate income for mental wellness programs forever, even far after I'm gone and my partner is gone. So we're working on that, and we're working on ways to come up with funding. Our idea is actually to fund those first 7,500 plates. We want to be able to get them ourselves. and then hold rallies throughout the state and create this excitement about talking about mental health and getting people involved. We have this saying that we want to bring mental health into the light, even if it's a traffic light. And we want to be able to give these plates to advocates and educators that are advocates and students and their parents and just create this really great movement. And I know we could do it. This is California.
Right.
For goodness sake. Right. We should be able to do this.
Right.
So we're going to work hard on that. And we've got some other projects coming down the pipeline. Our big one is getting this plate through and creating this awareness. So that's what we spend most of our time on, getting grants and trying to get this. Being Well will see zero money from the sale of these plates. This all goes back to the kiddos. We're working with the California Department of Education. They're our partners. And we're going to have it in writing exactly what this money is allocated for so it doesn't get sent somewhere else. Right. Because this is for our kids. There are wellness centers in some high schools now. I don't know if you know that. We were responsible for helping put in about 40 in Contra Costa County. But one of the things that we noticed that they all had in common is they were in Danville, San Ramon, Lafayette.
Livermore,
so what is that? Yeah, you don't see them in West County or East County. So we're just trying to level the playing field because every child deserves to be able to go into a wellness center, to take a break, to learn a little bit more about themselves, and to have a place for somebody just to listen. Every person should have a trusted adult they can go to.
And that is extraordinary. Well, Auntie Gail, is there any lasting things you want to let us know, you want to leave us with, our viewers, our supporters? Is there anything that you want to tell us or bring awareness to?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to say is that embrace your weird. Know that the internet, as much as it is the best thing that ever happened to this world, it's one of the worst. For the bullying and for everything toxic that's happening.
And the overload of information.
But also for parents, know that we're as big of culprit as our children. We complain about the children being on these games or internet all day long. But check out a restaurant and see how many people are sitting in a restaurant looking at or taking pictures of their food and searching the internet while they're sitting next to a person they can be actually having a conversation with. So one of the things I want to encourage everybody to do is, even if you can't have dinner together every night, at least make it one night a week and make it a no phone at the table. Kids know when they come to my house, and I don't care how old you are or how well you even know my children, if you're coming to eat at my table, you will not be bringing your phone because it's a place for conversation and fellowship. So know that even that can help you connect with your kids. And for kids, don't be afraid to, if you see something, say something. Don't be afraid to tell an adult if you see something wrong with one of your friends. It's not telling, really. You could save a life. Because a child thought enough of my daughter in school when she was cutting herself, they felt comfortable enough telling a teacher. That set us on this journey. It's a journey I wouldn't wish for anybody, but she may not be here to this day if that hadn't happened. So just know that you have power. You have power. And if your parents aren't the trusted adults that you need them to be, find one. Be it a teacher, a coach, your pastor, an aunt, somebody else's mother or father. Find that trusted adult.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, this has been another episode of Connected. Thank you for following along, and we will see you guys next time. Take care.
Thank you.